Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. You can also pick up your phone and call us, 329-1899, 329-1899, the phone number. All guests join us via the Raggich Brothers RV phone line. Let's take a look at what we got in the show today. Coulter's got some college football transfer information for us, some kids moving around a little bit, so we're going to go through that across the Big Sky Conference with you. We also are going to cover a little bit. Coulter says, I don't believe him, that he says this will be the last track and field installment of the year. Maybe so, but we did a lot of AA stuff.
For high school.
Right.
National meets next week, so we still got to talk about that for college.
No, well, we'll see. But we did not get through A, B, and C track and field as well, and as Coulter rightly points out, track and field's the great classification destroyer, because all that matters is how far you jump. It doesn't matter if you are in Webo or Billings. You jump as far as you jump, and that's the mark, and then everybody knows. It doesn't matter, the Class C guys, Class B girls, whatever it is. The mark is all that matters. So we'll get into a couple of those things. We also, in the next hour, are going to get into some NBA stuff. We want to talk about some possible trades. The Houston Rockets dangling Chris Paul and potentially Clint Capella out there as trade bait. Also, Anthony Davis meeting today with the New Orleans Pelicans, new management there. So a couple of things to get through on that side as well. So there you go. Show Outlook. Hi, Coulter. How are you? Nice afternoon out there in the world.
It is a nice one. Yes, I'm doing well. How are you, Gus Tutil?
I don't know, man. I'm all right.
God, this is just, I don't know. We're reaching the point where you got to make the choice. Come back amongst the living.
Here's the thing. Yesterday was my wife's birthday, and bless her heart, we had a wonderful time. Saw you out the evening yesterday, Coulter. You were good enough to swing by and make it a real festive atmosphere as you do. At some point though, I have got to get on a schedule that makes any sense at all. I'm now into
the reason it's so funny is this has nothing to do with the Philippines. You could have said that exact same thing about your life before you went on a trip across the world.
No, it does have to do. Because I came back and then I got sick, and now I'm not sick anymore. But now the allergies are kicking in.
Yeah.
And I can't breathe. I got snot coming everywhere. I sound like I'm sick. I sound like I have the worst cold. I'm fine. I feel good. It's just, I just can't get. I can't get through it.
I know you're sick.
No, I'm not sick.
Let me tell you how I know this.
Okay.
Every day at 3:55, you walk back here to the production room and you say, I don't know what we're going to talk about. I have nothing in the show. And you hand me one piece of paper that says segments 1 through 6, and there's nothing in them. Nothing. It's an empty white piece of paper that's wasted.
Yeah.
Today, I'm sitting here. I've got 9 pieces of paper.
Why is that, Tommy?
In like 7-size font.
Who put the show together today, Tommy?
Clearly a sick Ryan or Coulter. Coulter's just fishing for the compliments.
No, there's no compliment here. This is just a fact. I don't need a compliment for providing content.
Oh my gosh.
I did add. I have a couple of Wing It Wednesday questions that I wrote here.
Nice job.
I have a few other items that are in here. It is
you typed
true.
it up?
I did not go through and tell you about Scobie's Class C boys who won their first state championship since 1996. That was Coulter's work. He's the one who brings you that nugget of information. Coulter, you want to talk about some transfers?
We do. I do. I think this is actually important news for the University of Montana football team.
Okay. Let's hear it.
University of Montana football team. Well, I guess I'll start by asking you.
Yes.
Not just since Bobby Hauck took over, but just in the last handful of years, what have been the biggest weaknesses for the lines? The lines and the corners.
That's
it.
The corners were
better than you would expect them to be, considering that you had multiple converted wide receivers playing quarter.
Receivers, yes.
But
they were legitimately good in their own right. Not merely for having been wide receivers last year. They were tenable corners for the Grizzlies last year, I felt.
From Don Reed to Mick Dennehy to Joe Glenn to Bobby Hauck, Montana had a seemingly endless line of no pun intended, a seemingly endless string of ferocious pass rushers.
Yes.
And so many of those guys were from Montana. They came up in Montana. And I could just remember, like, if competing for playing time on the edge of the Grizz defensive line, there was a very distinct hierarchy to it and also sort of a method of climbing the ladder. And we saw guys like Mike Murphy and Dustin DeLuey and Lance Spencer who would rank in the top 5 in the league in sacks without even starting, because they would just rotate over and over. And then when you became one of the main guys, there's a very good chance you led the country in sacks and that you were among the finalists for the Buck Buchanan Award. And yes, so we saw guys. I mean, I remember Mike Murphy had a double-digit sack season before he was even a starter. And then by the time he became a starter, he continued that production. But same thing with Lance Spencer. A guy, Corey Bierman, was a spot guy and who then became the actual 2007 Buck Buchanan Award winner. And on down the line, Tim Bush, CCA Pitcher, Andy Pedic, a whole bunch of just absolutely dominant pass rushers. And that was the thing that made the Grizz so great is for so long, the Grizz hardly ever had to blitz to get pressure on the quarterback. And when you do that, combined with the fact you play at Washington Grizzly Stadium, I mean, at the absolute peak of the thing, when it's 3rd and 11, you're not getting a first down in Missoula, Montana. If you're the road team, you're getting hit at the very least, or you're getting sacked, or you're throwing it in the stands. And that was the momentum that Montana was able to build. And that was, I think, to me, the number one factor in 12 straight Big Sky Conference championships and multiple trips to the national championship game.
I think so.
And Tyrone Holmes was the last great pass rusher the University of Montana's had. He walked out the door in 2015. So it's been a few years now. Yeah. And I would say this is not just a phenomenon unique to Montana. Montana State has had an unbelievable lineage of defensive linemen. I mean, they had a defensive lineman All-American every decade, and more like multiple per decade, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And then up until Brad Daly won the Buck Buchanan Award 2013, Montana State's pass rushing has fallen off a cliff too. I mean, when Montana State won 3 straight Big Sky titles, the key stat was Brad Daly and Caleb Schreibeis with their double-digit sack seasons multiple years in a row. And that's just, it's the fact of the matter. And this is not unique to Montana college football or anything like that. But I do think it's a conversation to be had just in terms of the way that the in-state products have not been as prevalent. But also it seems like the development of those in-state guys maybe hasn't been as well. But the Grizz last year, they really struggled to get to the quarterback, especially up front. They had hardly any sacks up front. Most of their sacks came from their interior guys like Jesse Sims and Braden Deming. I can't really even – I think R.J. Nelson had 1 sack and Jed Nagler had a sack as edge guys. But, Dante Olson and Josh Buss are the ones leading the team in sacks, and they're the inside linebackers. They're getting 6 sacks each, and that's still nowhere close to the number of sacks. I mean, those Grizz teams are getting 50-plus sacks during the 2000s. So Montana added 3 edge guys over the last week and a half or so. They added Ryder Rice, who's a kid from Savage, Montana, who is an all-conference and all-American player at Rocky Mountain College. This is a graduate transfer. He's transferring up. That's intriguing. We'll get into that in a second. Joe Babros is transferring from NC State to the Grizz. A couple different connections. Joe Babros played at Saddleback Community College at the same time as Cam Humphrey.
Yeah.
But also he plays for Dave Dorn. Dave Dorn was an assistant football coach at University of Montana in the late 1990s. Now he's the head coach at NC State. So there's a natural connection there. Actually was talking to a couple guys downtown last week, and they were saying Dave Dorn was actually in town a few weekends ago. And so maybe that was something that helped kind of facilitate that transfer. And then the third kid is Mason Vineyard. He's a 6'5", 230-pound.
You should say, though, about Babros, he was the number 48 ranked overall JCO prospect by ESPN, the number 5 defensive end.
Yes.
He also only saw action in 1 game, did not record any stats this past season, which I find where's that disconnect? If he's that type of player in terms of the rankings,
guys that are number 5 JUCO defensive ends are pretty good, not that great.
But I mean, he played for Saddleback, right?
He did,
but he still gets to count this as a redshirt year.
What are you asking?
Okay.
So he played at Saddleback, and then he went to NC State for a year, and he didn't.
Oh, it was at NC State,
and he did not. He did not record any stats there.
That's what. Year at NC State, not the year at Saddleback.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. No, at Saddleback he was productive. I think he had 6.5 sacks and earned his way to the ACC. And third kid, Mason Vineyard. He's a guy that played at Washington State. He's from Helix High School in San Diego, which is most prominently known for producing Alex Smith and Reggie Bush. I guess that's crazy to think that was more than a decade ago now. But Helix High School is one of the powerhouses in San Diego.
More than a decade ago.
Yeah, more than a decade ago. You're right, because Reggie Bush was winning the Heisman more than a decade ago.
It's 17 years ago.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about, man.
That Reggie Bush.
A couple of my buddies in college were from San Diego. Trey Young, who played for the Grizz, he's from Helix High School. And a couple of his buddies who came up here with him, those were some of my good buds in college, and those guys were always touting Helix. But Helix hasn't been quite Reggie Bush, Alex Smith caliber since then, but still a good program. So Mason Vineyard, he comes in as well. And so all three of these guys eligible to play right away. And there's always a lot to be said about transfers, a lot of speculation to be made. But also, I think that some people assume transfers are just going to come in and be automatic impact players, and that's not always the case. But the thing I've always observed with Bobby Hauck is Bobby Hauck, he's very, very good at breaking down his roster, who's ready to play and who's not. And it doesn't necessarily mean if you're not ready to play that you're out. You just might not be ready to play that year. And he's so confident and so diligent in player development that a lot of times I think the guys that played on the edge for Montana last year, I think, are a really good example. And Jed Nagler was in his first year playing defense. I thought he got way better as the season went along. Yeah. He's a guy that was playing wide receiver under Bob Stitt, and then he converted to linebacker and then was playing on the D-line. And by the end of the year, he was pretty good. He could hold his own. And he's a phenomenal athlete. I loved him coming out of high school. But that's a guy that you would like to have be in more of a backup role for another year so he can then become physically ready to play. Or as a redshirt junior, that's when he should be ready to go. And then you look at a guy like R.J. Nelson. I mean, R.J. Nelson he's got the intangibles. I mean, he's 6'5". He's got long arms. He's rangy. He can run. But he's only about 215 pounds. He doesn't quite have the mass. So to me, these guys at the very least just give you some more bodies you can roll with up front. I also think this gives you the ability, especially if the younger inside guys like Braden Deming and Eli Alford can pan out. You can move Jesse Sims to that strong end. So now you can have, say just one of the three of these guys, these transfers, rises to the occasion and can give you a bona fide pass rush threat. Well, now you can play Sims on the opposite edge, and now you can play guys on the interior, and now all of a sudden your D-line looks a lot better.
Right.
It has a lot more options.
Right.
And so it'll be interesting to see how these guys compete. But
one question for you,
sure,
Coulter. You talked about Montana always seemed to have a dominant pass rushing, quarterback sacking, defensive end, specifically that type of guy.
Totally.
But how much of that has been maybe, not having some of the guys in terms of that caliber or where that skill set is what they're, best at coming through? And I think clearly that's true. I mean, when you look at, Zach Wagenman, Tyrone Holmes, and then going back in time, the guys in the last 5 years or so at the University of Montana clearly haven't. There hasn't been a guy who's been as good as those guys that just was doing different things. But also, the scheme defensively has changed.
No doubt.
It seems to me. And so maybe it's because you don't have an edge rusher like you've had in the past, but also, the emphasis on a guy like Jesse Sims to be a big offensive line gobbling nose tackle or interior defensive lineman to set up guys like the linebacking crew to go through, and whether it's make sacks or just make tackles and things like that. So schematically, it's not just about, okay, let's go get after the quarterback. And, some of that maybe is personnel, some of your scheme built because of the personnel that you have and what have you. So, but I'd be interested to know, where are you at on that? Is this simply a result of not being able or having not had the players or a player specifically of the ilk that they've had before? Or has it been, hey, we came in, changed some things, recruited different types of guys, ran a whole different scheme? They've had, now, are we at 3 or 4 defensive coordinators in 5 years at the University of Montana?
Yeah, right.
I mean, you go from Ty Gregorak into Seymour and now into Kent Baer / Bobby Hauck. And so, it's a lot of turnover in terms of what it is that you're up to.
It's a great question. It's a great point. Ty Gregorak ran a similar scheme his last year at University of Montana as what Mike Bresky favored. And that includes a lot of fire zone blitz type stuff, but also it was not a mistake that Tyrone Holmes got 18 sacks his senior year, not only because of how physically dominant he was, but also because they made sure to put him in the position to be the guy who got the sack.
And notably, obviously, Ty Gregorak, the defensive coordinator for a lot of those guys, and his last year, also Tyrone Holmes last year, not maybe coincidentally.
Totally. And so it's a great point when you're talking about like Jason Seymour, because his scheme was such a sporadic but also intricate zone blitzing scheme. It was a very feast or famine defense. I mean, you're prioritizing. The whole goal of the defense is to lead the country in tackles for loss, because if you can just stay ahead of the sticks like that and you're running 90 plays a game on the other side of the ball, it's kind of this cohesive deal. But the reason it was such a weakness is because you might beat a team 67-7, or you might be giving up first down runs to the quarterback on 3rd and 27 because you get out of a gap and
That would never happen.
Chris Murray is gone.
That would never happen.
Your point is well taken. I think the overarching but probably even more important and impactful point here, though, is not the defensive schemes, it's the offensive schemes. Now, with just the proliferation of spread offenses, but also just how much film is available at such an easy – I mean, now kids get iPads and they get the film directly downloaded onto their deal. You can be watching film at all times. You know schemes so much better. And you also – the schemes are so catered to getting the ball out of your hands. I mean, I used to talk about that with Bo Beck, Montana State's defensive line coach, all the time. You know, Bo Beck from Dane Fletcher to Dan Ogden to Caleb Schreibeis to Brad Daly. I mean, Bo Beck had 5 consecutive, Zach Minter, 5 consecutive All-American defensive linemen. And then it just was just over. They went from 45 sacks to 20 sacks in a year. And obviously when 18 sacks walks out the door of Brad Daly, that hurts you. But on the other hand, when you're talking about the fact that everybody now just goes 1, 2, 3, throw it, there's not a lot of time. I mean, you always have a check down. The offensive game has evolved so rapidly in college that it's just. And the other thing is that so many coaches, even coaches that never would go away from conventional stuff, have not only accepted, but have actually even become enamored with and fallen in love with running quarterbacks. Bobby Hauck always liked traditional style quarterbacks. Look at who he's got now. I mean, Dalton Steele's the best runner on their whole team.
Right.
You never expect a defensive guy like Jeff Choate to be obsessed with a running quarterback. That's all he's had in 4 years at Montana State. Right. And I think it's also because, especially at this level, those kind of guys are easier to recruit in a certain way.
Why are coaches obsessed with certain things? Actually, let me say it differently. Why are coaches obsessed with everything?
God, isn't that is the all-time golden question for people in the media that deal with coaches all the time.
They're obsessed with everything. And here's
I mean, I think it comes with the personality type, right? I mean, if you want to have a job where entire communities and states and the nation obsess over you and your results,
yes,
but that also is a job that never ends, never ends. You could be an absolute world beater and still be scrutinized around the clock, and you got to be at work at 5:30 in the morning. You don't get to go home till 10:30 at night during the season. I mean, it is a absolutely grueling job. That's why I think all those guys completely and utterly deserve all the money that they get paid.
Well, and I say this, I said this sort of tongue in cheek. When you mentioned Bobby Hauck and what he's got in Dalton Sneed compared to what he traditionally has looked for in a quarterback, and I also think I do think that the just general perspective on quarterbacks at large has shifted pretty dramatically now, where we talk about running quarterbacks now. That used to be a disparaging remark. It used to be that if you were a running quarterback, that was exactly it was the backhanded. You're not a great thrower of the football. You're a great athlete, or whatever it is. And in some cases, that certainly is true, but I guess my point is clearly Bobby Hauck, thinks the world of Dalton Sneed. Jeff Choate thinks the world of Troy Anderson, though Troy is apparently looks to be moving back to what would be his normal or rightful position, I guess I might say, as linebacker. But in any case, here's what I think great coaches are great at. Taking the skills that a kid has and using those. Like
No doubt.
the strengths that you have before you. So, if you have a certain offense that you got to run to make it work and you want to recruit to that, I get all that.
Totally.
But also, if you got a kid like Dalton Snead who does 7 things at a really high level, 2 things at a fairly high level, and has a couple of shortcomings, that just maximize the goods, and obviously that's what you're trying to do all the time. But it seems to me that some coaches, and I'm not implicating anyone specifically at all in this statement, this is just a blanket statement about broadly, it seems like there's a lot of coaches who do obsess not over the kid, not over the player, over what it is they want to do, what their football screen tells them to do. And instead of just letting their guys be who they are and make the plays they need to play. In fact, I think that Jeff Choate and Bobby Hauck have been really good about not being those guys, about trying to maximize and accentuate what you've got in front of you one way or another. I mean, you could, on one hand, you could criticize Montana State, Jeff Choate, about the, virtual wing tee that they ran from. They brought out the oldest truck in the garage and ran that thing on offense. But also, you could just as well, and maybe should, I think, compliment them on sort of not being afraid to do something that was so old school in order to maximize what you had. And, can't argue with the results. They got further than they've gotten in a long, long time in Bozeman in terms of both total wins and, a playoff win.
Yeah, no doubt. When you win a playoff game, it's you kind of get the last laugh. And when Troy Anderson sets the Big Sky Conference rushing record for quarterbacks and sets the school record for single season touchdowns, and you win 8 games and you take the next step as a program, I think all those things are pretty hard to argue. Obviously, anybody that watches Montana State or covers them intrinsically, you can kind of see. But I think that there's 2 factors here. I think that, first of all, I think there's 3 factors. I think that, one, you look at the best of the best. Look at Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney. Nick Saban has pivoted a great deal in his offensive philosophies because of the players he can recruit.
Yes.
They went from ground and pound, give the ball to Mark Ingram and TJ Yeldon and Trent Richardson and get out the way, to spread, zone read, Jalen Hurts, let's let this kid run around a little bit, to spread, huck it.
To halftime of the national championship game. This ain't working.
Pull him.
Bring in the lefty.
Tua Tagovailoa, bam, in. Throwing darts. You look at Dabo Swinney. Deshaun Watson and Kelly Bradley and Trevor Lawrence are not the same. And Clemson did not run the same stuff with those guys. They found a system to emphasize all 3 of their talents, and they won national championships with 2 of those guys. But also, there's almost no limit to what you can do and who you can bring in and how you can use them and all that stuff at places like Alabama and Clemson. You don't necessarily have the academic stuff a lot of times. You don't have some factors, like location and weather and all that. You're pretty much getting whoever you want. So you can morph a lot more easily. So much of the system stuff, like the spread first caught so much traction when Mike Leach was at Texas Tech. Because how do you recruit to Lubbock, Texas? How do you recruit to an engineering school in this heartland where Texas and Texas A&M and TCU, they can get whatever kids they want. They can, you had to be different. And it's a crutch.
And also when there's 2 of the kids on your starting defense, for instance, that can go toe-to-toe with all 11 kids on Texas's team.
Why Bob Stitt's offense is the origin of what you have to do to develop a system when you're at a school where you can't recruit everybody, right. Like Bob Stitt did at Colorado Mines. So I think that's one factor. But I also think that so often so many coaches, you can automatically brand them. Like Jeff Choate is a defensive guy. Bobby Hauck's a head coach because he's so good at the whole thing of the program. Bobby Hauck's a special teams guy more than anything else. And that's why he's so good at a program, because special teams coordinators, they touch everybody. And Bobby Hauck, he made such a good transition from being a special teams coordinator to a head coach at such a young age because of that. Jay Hill is a special teams defensive guy. But so often I think if you're branded as a defensive guy, you want to run an offense that you think would be a nightmare to defend. That's why I always think about Coach Choate, is he's like, well, I don't want to defend Chris Murray. I don't want to defend Troy Anderson.
Totally.
So let's run an offense that I would hate to make up a defensive game plan for.
Right.
And I think that's oftentimes where coaches, you don't want to say fall into, because I think that's adequate in a lot of different ways. But I also think it does leave you a little bit closed. But I think that the real thing here is that it's just really hard to recruit all the dudes you need to run all the stuff that you want. And sometimes you do have to pivot.
Absolutely.
And when Chris Murray just goes out and just fails school, you just have to figure out what you're going to do.
I want to talk more about this. I want to talk about this at the FBS level a little bit with you. I want to talk about this at Clemson and at Alabama and a few things. But first, I want to give away some wings.
Yeah.
329-1899. Wings to the Desperado Sports Tavern. The best wings in the city of Missoula. Call right now, 329-1899. I finally actually had like a small epiphany. You know, I'm so terrible at writing these trivia questions. I got some good trivia questions today. They are multiple choice. They are about the NFL. Okay? So give me a call, 329-1899. You want to do a Wing It Wednesday, get yourself some wings to the Desperado. Call right now. We'll do some trivia next.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes, too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
Les Schwab is proud to introduce two of our best tires ever, just in time for summer. There's our exclusive Reputation, a high-mileage premium passenger tire we believe has the quietest, most comfortable ride ever. Or our exceptionally quiet and smooth all-season traction tire, the Open Range AT. Get $50 off alignment when you purchase a set of 4 Open Range AT or Reputation tires. Book an appointment today at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires. Doing the right thing matters. Cannot be combined with other offers. Limited time only. See details at leschwab.com.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
Nothing says Florence coffee like a real huckleberry smoothie. Our real huckleberry smoothies are made with real huckleberries that grow high up on the mountainsides of Montana. Drive to any of our Flowco locations throughout western Montana and try a delicious real huckleberry smoothie. And visit us at florencecoffeeco.com.
The best flavor under the big sky. Florence Coffee Company.
Springtime is the time to buy
Julie for Trivia Julie.
sales event. Rebates go as high as $1,500 and financing is as low as 3.99%. Live your life wide open in a high-performance RZR. Tackle anything from mountains to mud holes on a legendary Sportsman ATV. Get more done with a hard-working Ranger or take on any task or trail in a versatile Polaris General. Whatever you're looking for, now is the time to take your pick from the off-road's best-selling lineup. See Polaris.com or your Polaris dealer for rebates up to $1,500 and financing as low as 3.99% APR for 36 months during the Polaris Spring Sales event at Kurtz Polaris. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula and Highway 83 in Sealy. Recreate the right way with Kurtz Polaris online at kurtzpolaris.com. Offer valid in U.S. through 5/31/19 on new 2015 through 2019 vehicles. Subject to credit approval. Offers vary by model. See dealer for details. Always wear a helmet. Never drink and ride.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon, Ryan Tutel, Colton Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Sports Center. Trace Tinkle, the 6'8" swingman who prepped at Missoula Hellgate, announced Tuesday he will return to Oregon State for his senior year to play for his father, former Montana head coach Wayne Tinkle. Trace said it had until Wednesday, that's today, to make his decision to remain in the NBA draft. The senior, who is two-time All-Pac-12 selection, is 511 points away from setting Oregon State's career record in scoring.
University of Idaho men's basketball coach Don Verlin was placed on paid administrative leave Thursday, one day after the university officials received a consultant's final report detailing 3 potential violations of NCAA bylaws. Idaho reported those potential violations to the NCAA, according to an athletic department spokesman. The report from the firm Ice Miller includes references to instances over the course of a few seasons. None of the violations involved impermissible monetary payments to players. The spokesman confirmed one of the violations could have to do with basketball operations staff member and former player Steven Madison allegedly practicing with the Vandals men's basketball team.
And finally, 4 Montana natives will compete at the NC2A Outdoor Track and Field Championships beginning in Austin on June 5th. Montana senior and Missoula native Hannah Filzer will become the first Grizz to compete in the national meet since 2015. Big Fork native and Colorado standout distance runner McKenna Morley, as well as a couple others, will be there. When we'll get to them in a minute.
Oh yeah, Tommy's on it.
Like, what is this one that you put into the rotation, Coulter?
It's Milli Vanilli, bro.
Oh. Here's the odd thing. Even when it is Milli Vanilli, it ain't Milli Vanilli.
Well, I mean, Milli Vanilli could be wherever you want it to be because Rob and Fab, it ain't them.
That's what I'm saying.
One of those guys died
That is true.
a little while ago. He was young, like mid-40s.
Yeah.
It's just really too bad that whoever is this guy that's actually singing didn't get to be famous. He's got a great voice.
How about the keyboardist? The thing I think is.
I heard Girl You Know It's True at the grocery store the other day. It's groovy.
You dancing in the aisle looking at the chili mix.
You know, I'm a sucker for certain 80s music.
Yeah.
You know, it's good stuff right there.
It's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway, Missoula Highway 83 in Sealy. Online at kurtzpolaris.com. Find us on Twitter at Gus Tutel, yours truly, at 102.9 ESPN. That's the station, and at Skyline Sports MT for your up-to-the-moment Big Sky Conference sports information, particularly on Montana State. It is now time for a Wing It Wednesday. We go to the phones. We welcome in Julie to the show. Julie, how are you?
Lori.
Oh, Lori. Okay. Lori, I'm glad that it's still you. Okay. Okay. we won't make you change your name around here. Well, Lori, thanks for being with us today. Are you in Western Montana, in the Missoula area?
Yes.
Have you had the wings at the Desperado before?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. They are the best in the city, according to the voting public, and we will try and get you set up. Here's the deal. We got 3 questions for you. You get all 3 of them. You got yourself a shirt. You got yourself the wings. You get 2. You still get the wings, and you got Coulter for a lifeline, all right?
Okie dokie.
Boy, some chicken wings would really hit the spot. Tommy likey. Tommy want wingy.
All right, Lori, here we go. 3 questions for you, and today I've got some NFL stuff. It is about attendance, a little bit of MLB stuff as well, but it's all multiple choice, okay? I was doing some research today. I said, these are the questions I'm going to ask, so we'll see what we can do here, okay? Question number 1. What NFL team had the highest average attendance last year? The Green Bay Packers, the New York Jets, the Dallas Cowboys, or the Denver Broncos? And now, I must say, this is a lot more. These first 2 questions here are really a lot more about the function of the building than they are about the team, I must say.
I was going to say that because I believe Dallas would have the largest stadium, and they did fairly well last year for a while, even though I despise them. But I'm going.
You are speaking my language.
Go with Dallas.
You have absolutely gotten it right. Dallas up in over 90,000, 91,000, because they have that huge tarmac. And so Jerry Jones, in his infinite wisdom, says, well, I could get 100,000 people in here if I let 30,000 of them stand out here where they can't see the game, but they still got to get into the building. So there you go. They're like 14,000 More than the next best. Do you realize the Jets were the number 2 in attendance? Is that crazy?
No, because East Rutherford holds like 95,000.
I mean, it
fans.
does. It holds a ton of people.
So they're at about 75% capacity, even averaging 75,000 fans a game.
Okay, Lord, very good. You got yourself question number 1. Nailed it. Let's go the other direction. What NFL team had the lowest average attendance? Washington, the Los Angeles Chargers, Oakland, the Oakland Raiders, or Cleveland? Which team had the lowest average attendance?
Ooh. Chargers. They haven't quite won over LA, I don't think.
You know what? First of all, they have not won over LA. It's hard to say that they ever won over San Diego.
Truth.
They won over Sean Rainey somehow, some way, but obviously he's a misguided young man. And also they're playing in a soccer stadium still at the StubHub Stadium. 32,000 a game for the Los Angeles Chargers. You have gotten yourself a basket of wings. Congratulations. Very well done. It's just that easy. You haven't even used the lifeline yet. Now, here we go. Now, this one's a little bit tougher, I think. I said they were NFL questions. This one's the same vein, but it's baseball for this season. To this point in the year 2019, what team has the highest average attendance in Major League Baseball? Is it the Chicago Cubs, the New York Yankees, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, or the Los Angeles Dodgers?
Oh. I think I might rely on Coulter on that one.
Yeah, well, why not?
I can tell you that's the most home runs, but not
attendance. Okay, well let's go, Coulter. And I will say that all 5 of these that I've offered you, and I'll tell both of you, are in the top 5. So there's no. This is. I didn't make this easy. I didn't throw the the Mets in here for you, or something like that.
Right.
The Marlins. These are all well-attended teams, but there is one team that's above everybody else.
This is hard. I just because of loyalty, recent success, things like that. I would say it's probably one of the 2 National League choices, the Cubs or the Dodgers. I'm going to say the Dodgers. I would say the Dodgers with about 80% confidence.
Oh, that's okay.
Well, that's more than I have in the Cubs, so I guess I'll go with yours, Coulter. Please.
Lori, I tell you what, you are wise to go with the man over here. It is the Los Angeles Dodgers, Riley Corcoran's team of choice. And
they kind of stink, too.
Well, I mean, they're not. I don't know if they stink. They maybe not as good as they were the last couple of years, but it's early still.
Right.
47,000 a game to see the Dodgers, almost 8,000, 7,000 more than the St. Louis Cardinals, who are the second highest team, just under 42,000 for St. Louis. So 3 for 3, Lori. That's how you do it. Very well done. Excellent
work. May I
work.
ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
With the team Bryce, what's his name, that big free agent that signed, where are they in attendance?
So Bryce Harper went to the Philadelphia Phillies. They are 6th in attendance at 35,000, almost 36,000. So they are right behind. It goes the Dodgers, and they're way out in front. The Cardinals, the Yankees are 3rd at just under 40,000. Then the Cubs at 4th. The Angels, and then the Phillies. And a good thought, too, with Bryce Harper going where he went. How's the attendance doing there in Philadelphia? It's still going it's going better than it was going, I'll tell you that, before him.
Cool. Yeah. Anything could go up with Mr. Harper.
No doubt. No doubt about it. Hey, give your information to Tommy. Very well done. We'll get you the wings and a shirt, okay? Excellently done by you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Coulter.
you.
Of course.
Okay, bye.
Just that easy. She's all over it.
3 for 3.
3 for 3.
Gotta love it.
That the baseball question was a tough question. The other two. So here's you want to know what you want to know what's ironic and funny. The Chargers by far the lowest amount of attendance in the NFL, and it's a necessity because of the StubHub Stadium. They also, incidentally, have the highest ticket prices of anyone because there is such a low amount of supply when it comes to seats. So almost $200 a ticket is the average ticket price last year for the Chargers. And they also have the highest quote unquote percent capacity. So you know how you can have, if you have a full barn, it's 100%, but in some of these stadiums they could put in actually quote unquote more than 100%,
Right.
which seems sort of. Anyway, the Chargers like 122% capacity of the StubHub Stadium. They're at 32,000. It only holds like 28 supposedly or whatever it is, and so they were doing as well as they could given the confines that they've gotten. Excuse me. Okay, Coulter, I wanted to continue just briefly here, a little bit of the conversation and something that had jumped up to me when we were talking about college football, because we had talked about the transfers and we talked about the positions and we talked about some of the FBS stuff. And this I don't know if there's a right way to go about it, but right now there's the two most dominant teams in college football are Alabama and Clemson, period.
No question.
And it's a wide gap between them and everybody else. What is the position if you're thinking about Alabama that you're like, and they got a lot of great players and a lot of great positions, but what is one, if you were going to say one position group, and I'm not sure there's a definitive right answer. I have one that I think is the right answer, but what's the position group where you go, well, Alabama, this is the best?
Interesting question.
And they pumped out great players at a lot of positions, no doubt about it. But
I think you got to say inside linebacker.
Okay.
Because there's like 5 starting inside linebackers in the league from Alabama. C.J. Mosley and Rolando McClain.
But would you say their linebacking core, like the linebacking group that they have year in and year out, is their most dominant position on the field? Even though they've put a long list of running backs in there. They put a long list of wide receivers in the league, long list of
honestly, it just depends on how you gauge it. If you were gauging it by the guys that have become an absolute elite all pros, it's probably wide receiver.
No, that's not what I'm gauging it on. I'm gauging it on the field in college. What position group is the best as a group?
It's so funny because Alabama actually, they have so many dudes in the league, so many dudes that are starting in the league, and very few guys that are stars. They have so many Jonathan Allens, like for the Redskins.
Totally.
Who was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. He's starting DN in the NFL, but he's not like an absolutely dominant guy.
Right.
Courtney Upshaw.
Yep.
On down the line. Quinnen Williams has a chance to be a star, I think.
Yep.
The most recent inside guy. And even their DBs are really good, but not like the LSU DBs have a lot more swagger and star power than the Alabama guys.
And that's why I don't think this is an obvious answer, as I said, because first of all, they have such a breadth of guys who have been great.
Yeah.
Or at least very good in the NFL. And also because it does vary year to year. Like there's certain teams, certain positions where you go, well, every year this is going to be it. But I think the offensive line at Alabama is consistently outstanding. And basically, for instance, last year, you would have said that the best offensive line group in the country was probably Oklahoma. But I think over the course of the last decade, you would take a decade's worth of Alabama's offensive lines over probably any other group in the country. Let's go to Clemson. What's the most
D-line?
No
not
doubt.
Close.
No doubt.
They said 3 top 15 picks.
And probably the best defensive line ever. At the
probably one of the best. Yeah, probably one of the best ever.
Which position, if you could have it, would you want? Would you want the greatest defensive line year in and year out, or the best offensive line year in and year out?
Well, Clemson's beat Alabama in the national championship twice,
and Bama's beat Clemson in the national championship twice.
Nah, just once. They beat him in the college football playoff in a non-national championship
in a semifinal.
Yeah.
Okay.
The list of Alabama guys, I'm on a website right now that breaks down guys from every school in the country, and every school has between 4 and 12 guys, and Alabama's is like 4 scrolls long. It's just unbelievable. Here's a good one for you. Who is the biggest star from Alabama in the league right now?
The biggest star?
Yeah. Who's
probably Julio.
Julio Jones, yeah. I would say
Right?
Julio Jones. Julio Jones and Mark Ingram probably. Julio Jones is significantly.
I mean, I would say at this point, especially with what happened last year, I'd say Amari Cooper's surpassed Mark Ingram.
Yeah.
I would. And you know what? That
Calvin Ridley's making waves as well.
it's only because of the positions they play, right? I mean, like
True.
you said, there's probably, other than Julio, he's a Hall of Famer, there are more better Bama linebackers in the league, but people just don't know about these guys as much as they know about the wide receivers and the running backs.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
everybody
Alabama-
knows O.J. Howard. What's O.J. Howard ever done?
Sure, right.
Not much.
Landon Collins is probably in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
HaHa Clinton Dix is a recognizable name because of multiple things. Playing for the Packers, not being as good as people want him to be, and having a funny name.
Pretty good.
No, he is pretty good. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because what you're saying is true because, not a lot of people know who Cam Robinson and Jonah Williams and, the all-pro offensive lineman from Alabama are.
One more question for you. Does it bore you that Alabama and Clemson are definitively the two best? There's no argument about it, and then it's everybody else.
It doesn't bore me because I'm not bored by greatness. I think it's great that there's peers for each other. The only thing that I do find tiresome is the fact that because of the TV contracts and because of the stratification and delineation and separation of the Power Five, that results are directly related to resources now in football.
No question. I mean, they always have been, but
they always
there
have
are
been.
more
But
resources
I guess now,
to accentuate that.
They always have been, except for now. First of all, because the NCAA is so adamant about enforcing their rules, both for the good and bad of the game.
Yep.
Like, for example, SMU bought a national championship back in the 80s.
No doubt.
And then they got the death penalty, but that's a little bit more fun to me than the teams that, I mean, just because, like, that couldn't happen now.
Right.
Like you cannot catch Ohio State if you're in their little regional bubble. SMU went and caught Texas and Texas A&M and Alabama and Arkansas. Cincinnati and Akron and Miami of Ohio there is no way in the world that they can catch Ohio State because Ohio State is operating a business that's churning out hundreds of millions of dollars as an athletic department.
Yep.
You just can't match it. I mean, when you're a school like Alabama or Ohio State or Stanford, where you have fully funded every varsity sport, you are just making money hand over fist. I mean, if you want to go have yourself a good laugh and also feel just depressed about your state of life, go look up it's on the internet. You can just Google athletic department salaries at places like that. There was a great article in Sports Illustrated about Tennessee. Tennessee is, certainly one of the top 30 probably athletic departments in the country, but they are not in the same breath as an Alabama or a Michigan or Ohio State or at this point probably even a Clemson. But they're still, they still have one of the biggest stadiums in college football. They still have success in a variety of sports, especially particularly women's sports. But for example, like the assistant strength coach at Tennessee makes like $240,000. Right. Like the director of SpaghettiOs at the cafeteria makes like $85,000, because they have to get rid of the money because it has to operate as a nonprofit.
Yeah,
the money's just crazy.
Got to get to zero.
And that's with a head football coach that quote unquote only makes $3.5 million, not $9 or $10 million like Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban.
I'll answer my own question.
Does it bore you?
Doesn't bore me. Doesn't bore me, and there's two reasons it doesn't bore me. One is because there isn't one that's the best. There's two. If it was just Alabama year in and year out, I'd be pulling my hair out. But because Clemson is an equal to Alabama, in some people's minds, maybe has even pulled ahead. I mean, certainly isn't that, the defending national champion now.
Totally.
So to have those two matters because you're getting there at the end anyway. And the other thing is, the stratification is not this is odd, but the stratification is not nearly as big in any one year as it is over the course of the last years. The point is that are Alabama and Clemson way out ahead in totality of Georgia and Ohio State and Washington? Yes. But, for instance, last year, Alabama was it double overtime with Georgia to get to the national championship game?
Right.
So even though Alabama is the better program, no questions asked, it's an historic fact. But in any given year, with Kirby Smart's building there, Georgia-Alabama is a game that's an absolutely got to watch it. Ohio State, potentially. Now, who knows, with Ryan Day, right? But point being, Clemson-Ohio State, that's not 40-10. That's a coin flip. So the games are still competitive when it comes down to the wire, even though the two programs that are the best are not in question. And I think that is intriguing. So now in this forthcoming season, we know who's going to be 1-2, but that doesn't mean that those two teams are going to be playing again for a national championship. And by the way, even if it does mean that, that's okay, because we won't know what's going to happen in that game.
And when this is all said and done, because like I always say, all good things must come to an end.
Yep.
Alabama will owe a great deal of the Nick Saban legacy to Clemson and vice versa. Yep. Would Alabama have won 5 of the last 10 national championships if they didn't have a peer to push them along? I mean, maybe, because Nick Saban's got it rolling.
Right.
But the fact that they've continued to improve, like I'm looking at this Alabama list of players in the league, and it's actually striking because almost every single dude who I would say has a chance to be a star are guys that have come out the last couple years, which to me indicates that they're recruiting an even higher caliber player than they were, and that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, what was it 2 years ago when they won the national championship, and 8 of the players on the field were true freshmen?
Right. Like Landon Collins has been in the league for 3 years. He's already a star. Guys like Micah Fitzpatrick and Alshon Robinson and Deron Payne and Quinton Williams, all these guys have chances to be stars.
Yep, no doubt. All right, there's a lot more we can say on that. And guess what? We got 100 days between now and the start of the football season. A little less than that.
I think it's actually 97
let's
at this
go.
point.
Let's count them down. We'll get into a lot more of that because I think there's a lot more there to talk about. It's enjoyable. But we got to move on because Coulter's got some numbers to give you. And he promises people, not just numbers this time, stories.
Got stories for you.
The Montana Club invites you to stop in for Club Cocktail Hour. Every day from 3 to 6, sip on $5 martinis. Get $1 off all wine and beer, including cool Montana Micros. Enjoy $3 off all mouth-watering appetizers, or swing by Friday for Montini Night and perfectly mixed $5 top shelf martinis from 3 to close. It's time to relax at the Montana Club. Real Montana, real food on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Alpine Touch has mastered keeping your taste buds happy by spicing up anything you throw on the grill this summer. Now, let Alpine Touch keep your mouth watering whenever you want their new sunflower shooters. Their new jumbo sunflower seeds seasoned with Alpine Touch's world-famous all-purpose seasonings. And Alpine Touch sunflower shooters will be available all summer at every Osprey baseball home game. Available at retail locations around the state and online at alpinetouch.com. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, ooh, pump it up, pump it up.
Ready to stock up on some party drinks? Town Pump is your store. We've got 18 packs of Twisted Tea for only $18.99, and grab a few bottles of Apothic 750 milliliter wine for a low $9.99. Town Pump Food Stores, proud to be part of our community.
Town Pump, right down the road, pump it up, oh yeah.
Hockey and Lacrosse Wolf is moving. That means we got to clear out the old so we can start fresh with the new. From now until June 5th, all lacrosse gear will be 20% off and all hockey gear will be 40% off. Come check out our massive selection and supreme savings before we move to our new location. 20% off all lacrosse gear and 40% off all hockey gear at Hockey and Lacrosse Wolf on the corner of Brooks and Stevens in Missoula.
Hey folks, the best season of the year is upon us. That's right, it's tax return season, and there's one place to have the most fun and make that refund check stretch further than anywhere else, Selway Armory. Selway Armory has the largest selection of firearms, ammo, and accessories of anywhere around, and they have the expertise to go with it. It's not everywhere that you can shop local and save money, but Selway Armory will meet or beat any box store price, and your money stays in Montana. It's tax return time, so get more bang for your buck at Selway Armory. Visit online at selwayarmory.com. Hey folks, Ryan Tutel here with Josh from The Advocates. If you've been in a car accident and need help dealing with the insurance company, you should give The Advocates a call.
It doesn't cost anything at all to call, and I'd be happy to talk with you about your situation. You don't want to have to be dealing with contacting the insurance companies and setting up your claim. We can do that for you from start to finish. We'll take the hassle out of the process so you can just focus on getting better.
There you go, folks. If you've been injured in an accident, give Josh a call, 640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com. There are a lot of lawyers, but you deserve an advocate.
Tutel and Nuanez. Listen to the podcast on the TuneIn Radio app or on iTunes. 1029ESPN.com.
Now we're making it happen. Gold Lion, yes.
It's almost as good as Blame It on the Rain.
Dude. You don't know about the yes.
Sure I do.
No, I'm not saying you.
If you don't.
I'm saying if you don't. If you're listening,
right.
you don't. Go find out, okay? Now, you may not like them. They're particularly artistic, I think I could say aptly, both in music and in style and in performance. But Karen O, one of the great singers, performers, frontwomen in all of music. And
is she as good as Cher?
Well, you know what? Actually, it's funny because she might be like the next generation Cher, you know? I think there's maybe a lot of similarities there. I don't know enough about Cher, though, to say honestly what I think about that. I would say they have gotten into the same closet on a time or two with some of the costuming that they've brought out. Tutel Nuanez, 1029 ESPN Radio, broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway, Missoula Highway 83 in Sealy. Online, KurtzPolaris.com. It's time.
Now make Tommy happy. Just go out, back in.
You don't want to do it?
No, I do want to come. I do want to do it. We'll do it at the beginning of the next segment, where this is going to take a couple minutes.
Well, we got a couple minutes.
Okay, we got a couple minutes. We'll just rip through some of these.
So prep extra segment is brought to us by the Farmers State Bank. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, just some results for just some of the standout stories from the Class A and C meet was in Laurel, and then the Class B meet was accompanying the AA meet in Kalispell. So first, just a couple quick hitters on the Class B meet. Casey Gunlickson, who's heading to Montana State to run track. Yeah. He's from Big Timber. He was the state champion in the 100 and the 200. He got third in the 400. That was a repeat championship sweep in the sprints for him in the 100 and the 200. He also won state championships in the 300 hurdles 2 previous times. So he ends his standout career with 6 gold medals. Outstanding, one of the great sprinters and one of the great athletes to ever come out of Sweetgrass County High School in Big Timber. Huntley Project boys, we talked about just their dominance, led by Bradley Graves and his all-class record in the 110 hurdles. And a couple of the standouts on the girls' side of things, Whitney Hansen from Harlem. She won the 800, the 1600, and got second in the 3200. So that's incredibly difficult to do, 28 points for her. And Rezi, I'm going to try to say this, Rezinski from Baker.
Sounds good to me.
It's
Baker, Montana.
One of those legendary Montana names.
Schillinger, shout out.
You'll never forget that name, and I know she's had multiple brothers and maybe cousins. That's a name that's been in Baker for a really long time. But this young lady, this is epic. She contributed to 64 team points for Baker over the weekend.
Seems like a lot.
She won the 200 meters, the 110 hurdles, the 300 hurdles. She also finished second in the 100 meters, second in the long jump. So 44 individual points. And then she ran the anchor legs on gold medal winning 4x100 and 4x400 meter teams. So she capped her career with a total of 7 gold medals in one meet.
Well done.
Amazing.
Seems like a little selfish.
Class A, Class C meet. Dillon and Laurel boys shared the boys title. Levi Taylor, who we've talked about a couple times on this show, one of the best distance runners in the state. He proved that. He won the 800, the 1600, and the 3200, which is the trifecta that is perhaps the most difficult trifecta. Getting the sprints trifecta is such a prestigious display of speed and athleticism, but the toughness and endurance it takes to win the 800, the 1600, and the 3200 in one weekend is crazy. And he literally dove over the line to win the 800. When the times flashed, they were identical, and they had to go to a photo finish. And he broke the plane by 1/100th of a second to get that 800 win. So very impressive. Levi Taylor on his home track in Laurel, leading his team to a share of the boys' title. Carter Hughes, the best thrower in the state, and he proved again why he threw the best marks in the state this year in the shot put and the discus. And on the girls' side, Whitefish won the girls' title, and the most notable mark from the Class A girls' side, Angelica Street from Columbia Falls. She shattered the all-class record in the javelin, and she's only a junior. So she's already flirting with 160s, which would be nationally prominent on the college level, and she's only a junior in Class A. So she remains to be heard from. And then on the Class C side of things, Scobie won their second ever boys' title, first since 1996. Martin Farver won the 100, the 200, and the 400. He also was second in the 110 hurdles and led his team to a pair of relays. Millstone's Brody Greeby, who's a kid who we talked about on the show quite a bit. He surpassed 3,000 points in basketball this year, and he's a kid that he's going to do something unique. And we'll talk about this later on because he's going to a prep school on the East Coast because he's a Class C kid that wants to get recruited at a high level. And I think this is actually really smart for him to do because he's a phenomenal athlete, but he's in Millstone, Montana, so there's not a lot of guys seeing him. But with some of these marks, if he can prove on it, I mean, this kid's such a diverse athlete that, first of all, he threw the shot put 51.7, which the program had the record printed wrong. It had it printed at 50 feet and 7 inches, so he thought he broke the state record by a full foot. And then they come back and they say, oh, it's a misprint. It's supposed to be 56.07, so he was short. Still a state champion, but probably disappointing. Then he goes out in the blocks in the 200. He's got the best qualifying time in the field, and he false starts, disqualified. Tears. Bounces back, wins the long jump, notches the top triple jump in the entire state, and finishes second in the 100 meters. He competes in a total of 6 events, and his triple jump was farther than Elias DeWaters, if that puts that into perspective from a Class C kid. So absolutely impressive by him. And on the girls' side in Class C, Sealy Swan won there for the 8th time, first since 2014, but the 8th title for Sealy Swan. So congratulations to them. They racked up gold medals all the way across the board, including one from a young lady named Autumn Moore. She did not compete in the javelin until the divisionals, and then she went out and won the javelin at state.
Must be nice.
It was a great story in the on 46mtsports.com. Her coach basically, you could hear him yelling from the stands. He said, "Throw it like it's gonna hurt," and then she throws it and pops a over 130-foot throw and bursts into tears. And then she went to the reporter and said, "It didn't hurt. I'm just so happy." That's what you gotta love. But congratulations to all the state champions with great marks, and that's a wrap on prep sports, at least at the high school level, for the 2018-2019 school year.
Coulter, great work. It's a prep extra segment. It's brought to us by Farmers State Bank. Remember, a Farmers State Bank personal loan can help you finance things like a used car, boat, or camper, that new deck you're planning to build, or a summer getaway. Online, farmersebank.com. Hour 1 in the books. Hour 2 ahead. NBA free agency. Houston dangling pieces out there. Should they? And who should want them? Next.
Some so-called sports bars, you spend so much time fighting to see the TV, you're better off just staying home. Others show the game, but a basket of stale rye chips is not exactly your idea of a good game grub. At the Desperado, you get front row seats to every single spring baseball and NASCAR event, plus all the spring NBA and NHL postseason action. And with juicy burgers, ice-cold brews, and the best wings in town, you'll leave the Desperado satisfied whether your team won or lost. The Desperado Sports Tavern, where the emphasis is sports, food, and good times on South Russell, across from the Y.
Hey there, Colter Nuanez from Tutel Nuanez 1029 ESPN Missoula here with Tom from Aspen Sound. Tom got me a great deal on an automatic car starter this winter. Now it's summer. What sort of stuff you guys got going on down there, Tom?
Well, Colter, coming into the summertime, we're picking up on the window tinting front. So if you need your windows tinted, give us a call. We'll get you scheduled up. Boats and ATVs are starting to come in full swing, and we're also starting to see the hot rods come out to play. Anything audio related, let us know. We'll get you taken care of.
Feel the music at Aspen Sound.
Hey everybody, here with my good friend Josh from the Advocates Injury Law Firm. Josh, if I've been in an accident, how much is it going to cost me to hire you?
Well, we take cases on a contingency fee. And what that means for you is that if you're hurt in an accident, we only get paid if you make a recovery. You'll never owe us anything out of pocket.
What about the call for a consultation?
That's not a problem. We don't charge anything for an initial consultation, so you have absolutely nothing to risk by calling us.
If you're injured in a car accident, call the Advocates, 640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com.
The splash of launching a new boat, the quiet of a favorite campsite, the noisy fun of a family barbecue on your new deck. Whatever summer sounds like to you, make it happen with a personal loan from Farmers State Bank. 9 locations to serve you, or start the loan application process online at farmersebank.com. Farmers State Bank, your Montana bank since 1907, an equal housing lender and member FDIC.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
Les Schwab is proud to introduce 2 of our best tires ever just in time for summer. There's our exclusive open range AT that we believe is our quietest, smoothest, and best all-season traction tire ever, or the Reputation, our exclusive high-mileage premium passenger tire. Get $50 off alignment when you purchase a set of 4 open range AT or Reputation tires. Book an appointment today at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires, doing the right thing matters. Cannot be combined with other offers. Limited time only. See details at leschwab.com.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana, KKVU HD3 Stevensville, and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon. Ryan Tutel, Colter Nuanez, ESPN Sports Center. Trace Tinkle, a 6'8" swingman who played high school basketball in Missoula at Hellgate, announced on Tuesday he will return to Oregon State for his senior year to play for his father, former Montana head coach Wayne Tinkle. Trace had until today to make his decision to remain in the NBA draft. The senior is a 2-time All-Pac-12 selection who is 511 points away from scoring Oregon State's career record in scoring.
Idaho's in big trouble again. Head coach Don Berlin placed on paid administrative leave. We'll get more into that in a little bit. Instead, I'm going to give you something more interesting for our listeners. Trio of defensive ends transferring to the University of Montana. Ryder Rice, a Savage product who played at Rocky Mountain College in Billings last year, is grad transferring to UM. Joe Babros, who's a transfer from NC State, will also join the Grizzlies. And Mason Vineyard, a outside linebacker / rush end transfer from Washington State. He's a Grizz as well.
And finally, 4 Montana natives will compete in the NCAA Outdoor Track and Field Championships beginning in Austin on June the 5th. Montana senior and Missoula native Hannah Filzer will become the first Grizz to compete in the national meet since 2015. Big Fork native and Colorado standout distance runner McKenna Morley, Corvallis native and San Francisco 800 specialist Sadie Henderson, as well as Helena pole vaulter Chase Smith of Washington will also compete.
I had to think a while.
Chris Paul on the auction block. Tantalizing. This is Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at kurtzpolaris.com. You can find us on the World Wide Web, 1029ESPN.com. There you can listen to the stream live anytime. including this show from 4 to 6 Mountain each and every weekday. Stream is there thanks to Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. If you can't listen in live, or it was just so good the first time around that you want to double dip, well, God bless you. I wouldn't argue with you for a second on that. The podcast is available on the TuneIn Radio app, iTunes, and Spotify. Podcast out there thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. Coulter, here we go. Hour number 2, NBA. Oh, the glory that is the NBA. And how this becomes public information sometimes, I'm not really sure. If the team wants it to be public information from time to time, I guess sometimes maybe not. But everybody basically in Houston is up for trade potential outside of James Harden. That includes, namely, Chris Paul and Clint Capella. First of all, should the Houston Rockets want to trade either of those guys? And I guess the answer is an obvious one. Well, it depends what you get in return for those guys. But who is going to be out there that would be coming in a non-free agency situation, which a trade obviously would be, that you're going to be able to get to make a run at Golden State? Anthony Davis? Maybe? I don't know.
I mean, we just went over this yesterday. You posed the hypothetical of what if Anthony Davis and who was the other one you said? You said
Kevin Durant.
Kevin Durant went to the Los Angeles Lakers.
Right.
And joined LeBron James. Who would be favored between them and Golden State? And we both took pause.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. There is no team you can assemble.
That's the point. And so here's the question, though. Is moving Chris Paul a smart thing to do if you're the Houston Rockets? And to where?
Well, so first of all, this has to do with two different things. First of all, came out last week that basically no one on the Rockets likes Chris Paul. It's one of these infighting articles, whatever. But it said that basically, I mean, James Harden said on the record, we didn't necessarily see eye to eye this year.
I've also heard that James Harden was loving the fact that Chris Paul was in Houston because he finally had a teammate who liked basketball as much as he did. And
that was 2 years ago.
They were leaving weddings to go play midnight hoops in Los Angeles.
Totally, but that's 2 years ago, right? I mean,
so what?
That's the Lee Jenkins romanticized story when Chris Paul joins the team. Things change a lot in the NBA, as we know. I mean, look at how much things changed in Boston over the span of 1 year. It was Kyrie Irving's going to be back. The Celtics going to win 65 games. To we're struggling. To Kyrie Irving saying all this crazy stuff. To then Kyrie Irving's a leader and the Celtics are rolling, and then all of a sudden they fall apart, and now Kyrie's leaving. And
that's why I don't believe any of it. I don't believe any of it. It's a work environment. It does change, but it doesn't titanically shift this way all the time. You and I worked together 2 years. You hate me. I love you. And we get out here, we get the job done every day.
No, that's not true at all. I see. Here's where I'm at. I think it's the exact opposite of what you say. I think you believe all of it. I think these guys are that volatile. We talk all the time about just the state of society. It's one of my favorite things to talk about with you. And we talked about this over the weekend with Coach Mettler from the recently anointed Sentinel track and field state champions. And what we live in right now, one of the biggest issues with our society and with young people in general, some of the biggest challenges they face, is that it is possible to surround yourself with a culture and a circle of enablers at all times. And the NBA is the absolute most striking and stark example of that of any entity you can find in America right now. These guys are that volatile. They are that crazy. Brett Brown might do a podcast with Zach Lowe and talk about how much better Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons are getting along, and 2 weeks later, they truly can hate each other. The fact of the matter is, I think that, first of all, the Rockets didn't live up to expectations this year, and that's tough. Second of all, the NBA is a business, first and foremost, and the players are commodities. Chris Paul is not worth what he's getting paid, period. If he misses the amount of time he missed this year and he doesn't show that he is a top 10 NBA player, you cannot be playing Chris Paul $40 million plus a year. I mean, Chris Paul has, I would argue, the second worst contract in the NBA with the exception of John Wall. And the reason John Wall's is worse is because of John Wall's injury.
Chris Paul missed some time, certainly, but that team was revolutionized when he came back. I mean, what
for a moment
is
but he was largely irrelevant in the playoffs, specifically in the series that they lost.
They're always going to lose to Golden State.
I agree.
So
I agree, but Chris Paul was not the same difference maker as he was even a season earlier.
Okay. Here's the thing for me. The contracts being bad contracts in the NBA don't matter as much as they do in other sports because there is so much money to go around. You can absorb that money, and it's still better to have a good to very good player like Chris Paul than to not, even if he's being, quote, overpaid.
It's true. It's true. But you also you have to make decisions because what you said is true to a certain extent, but you cannot, no matter what resources you have, no matter how willing your owner is to pay the luxury tax, no matter all that stuff, you cannot have multiple max contract guys by the rules and by the structure of it all. So you always have to make choices.
Totally.
And if you want your choices to be James Harden and Chris Paul, then you got to get rid of somebody else.
Yeah.
And what they're deciding to do right now, I think, is not necessarily completely cut ties with Chris Paul, but they're choosing James Harden.
Of course.
It's not the wrong decision.
No.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, I agree to a certain extent with what you're saying, but Chris Paul is set to be the single highest paid player in the NBA next year because of the way his contract works. The middle year is the highest year. He's going to make $38.7 million next year. I don't care what world you live in. Chris Paul does not deserve to be the number one player in the league. He is a great player. He's a Hall of Famer. If Chris Paul had more team success in his long and outstanding NBA career, I think we would be talking about Chris Paul as one of, if not the greatest point guard that ever played the game. But he hasn't had it. And he does not deserve to make that much money.
Totally agree.
And with the way the NBA is going to shift, there's so many teams have stacked so many assets, but there's also so many guys that are great assets that are also expendable because of the volatility of their personality. And that's why you have to always pivot. Because, sure, Chris Paul and James Harden might have got along great before, and all the stuff coming out of Houston's camp is that that's not the case anymore. It's not necessarily that it's a absolute hatred thing, but it's just they're not seeing that eye to eye. And the fact of the matter is, when you got a dude like James Harden, your window is now. You have to do it now.
I agree with that. Here's two things. Okay, first of all, because I want one thing, and then I want to talk about Clint Capella in this too, because he's an interesting case study to me in this. But when we talk about guys getting along or not getting along or friction or whatever, we think that this matters because when we look at team sports, we talk about things like chemistry, about camaraderie, brotherhood, family, whatever it is, all of that stuff, and that often it expresses itself in better performance, in better play on the court, on the field, whatever it might be, when there is that true, like, if not love and care for each other. And actually, that is true. I don't deny that at all. But I also say this. These are professionals. You said yourself, the NBA is a business, and these players are commodities. And you know who knows that? The players know that. And any business you find me, a workforce that's out there, you got people who get along real well, people that don't get along as well. In some cases, people who flat out don't like each other.
Right.
You can still go and professionally do your job, even in that circumstance.
You can, except for that's another reason why basketball is so unique, because team chemistry is more important than in any other organization you'll find.
Yeah, but
you will never find an NBA championship team that do not get along, except for the ones that Michael Jordan played on, and that's because he's a psycho.
You know what? I think you don't find winning teams that don't get along because winning is fun. And all of a sudden, now that you're winning, everything is okay. Chris Paul and James Harden aren't getting along today because they ran into the roadblock again that is the Golden State Warriors. Had they beaten the Golden State Warriors, we would be reading articles about all of the filet mignon dinners that they're taking each other out to and all the bottles of Ciroc that they are draining together. That's what we'd be reading about. The losing is the thing that makes it so that now we have to confront each other and not get along. And why did you do this or why did you not do that? Had they won, it would be the exact opposite. So that's what I think about this. And I don't think that team chemistry, let me say this clearly. Not only do you need to have it, but it is important. I don't think it's as important as people seem to think it is, though. I think people think that this is the absolute most critical part of all of this stuff, and it just isn't. What's the most critical thing is how high can you jump? How well can you shoot? Do you know where to move without the basketball? And it doesn't matter if I like you or not. Joel Embiid is not passing the ball to Ben Simmons on a given play because they had a spat yesterday in the locker room.
Right, but wouldn't you agree with James Harden has continued to evolve throughout his NBA career. James Harden,
no doubt.
James Harden, people forget, was a
bench player,
but also a pass first point guard when he was in Oklahoma City. I mean, he was a distributor who could get to the rack. He couldn't shoot like he could now.
Right.
So that's why he was more like a 16 points and 7 assists type guy off the bench, backing up Russell Westbrook. James Harden, the way he plays, it's gone into hyperdrive each year, peaking with this year. But I also think that it cultivates a higher sense of entitlement, a higher sense of self, a higher sense of duty. I mean, when you go out and score 37 points per game, how are you going to then welcome back in a guy who's a 20-point per game scorer? It's hard. And how are you going to keep him happy? Article on The Athletic, it's basically about the argument that Chris Paul and James Harden got into in the locker room after the game, after the Rockets were eliminated.
Which I do believe, by the way.
100%. I mean, and you fight most with your brothers, and you fight most, like you're saying, with the people that you're closest with.
And you fight in the aftermath of another playoff defeat.
Totally. But I just think that with where they're at, I just think that Chris Paul, at 34 years old, knows that it's down to it. He's got 3 years left on his contract and probably 3 years left in his career. And Chris Paul needs to have the ball in his hands. He needs to be the floor general.
Yeah.
And when you play with James Harden, you do not have the ball in your hands most of the time.
Totally.
And I think that in itself, regardless of if they want to go have lattes on Sundays, it doesn't matter. Chris Paul needs to be the point guard. He's the point guard. And James Harden, you can't.
Is that?
Well, it's Daryl Morey's fault.
It's Daryl Morey's fault.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, this is a total tangent, but I think about this all the time. You know that I voraciously listen to podcasts about the NBA specifically, but just on sports in general.
Yes.
But the NBA more than any other league, first of all, the media is so intertwined, especially the top guys are so intertwined with all the guys in the front offices. And there's all these alliances. And I mean, the guys that kind of lead the charge in terms of coverage when it comes to the modern age version of doing this is Bill Simmons, Ryan Russillo, and Zach Lowe. Those are the 3 NBA experts that Adrian
and Tutel Nuanez.
No doubt.
Okay. So
shout out to those guys for being influences, because it's true. I listen to every single thing that all those guys put out. It's all very insightful and all that. But I always think it's so interesting because, first of all, to me, the sign of a healthy organization, especially in a league that's as dysfunctional and full of drama as the NBA, is the amount of leaks or lack thereof. The fact that every single possible thing that could have leaked did leak out of the LA Lakers this year is just a striking example of how dysfunctional they are. Mm. But I also think it's so interesting the alliances that are made. And this is not unique to the NBA. It's just accentuated more in the NBA. But this has been going on for, since the rise of mass media, where, coaches chum up to reporters and analysts to get them, so you know each other on a personal level, and then you defend that guy a little bit more, or you give him a little more rope. There's no doubt that Bill Simmons loves Daryl Morey, that he loves him. And so he's praised him effusively over the years. And Daryl Morey's won multiple NBA Executive of the Years because of it. I don't think Daryl Morey's as good as everybody thinks he is. Here's the thing I think about Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey is undeniably creative. Daryl Morey is undeniably courageous because they've done more weird stuff and played more different styles of basketball than anybody in the NBA in the last 10 years. But, I mean, think back to just like 3 years ago when they were trying to roll with Dwight Howard and Brian Anderson and guys like this. They have been innovative. The way that they play has definitely changed the game. For better or worse, that's the argument. I'm not sure yet still. But I also think that Daryl Morey is very knee-jerk. And you got to give him credit for when stuff's not working to the way he wants it to work, that he'll make a change. But I also think that they've made so many changes. How do you ever find anything?
Well,
how do you ever find continuity?
Let me say two things, okay? Because even as I was saying it's Daryl Morey's fault, I was going to sit here and not really recant that, but what's his fault? That Chris Paul has to be a ball-dominant player, but obviously the guy that you need to have being ball-dominant is not Chris Paul, it's James Harden.
Right.
So there is this sort of, I don't know if it's oil and water, but certainly a tension in how you're going to have to play basketball if both those guys are there, which is obvious enough. That said, if you can have two Hall of Famers in your front court playing next to each other, you think, well, you know what? We got Mike D'Antoni. Let's go out here and let's figure it out. Let's work it out. You know, having a two-headed monster and you could figure out a way to do that. And in a lot of ways, I actually think it's worked. And by the way, we all have already said, who's the second best team in the West? It's Houston. It's the Houston Rockets. You know what that is? As good as you're going to get. Nobody's going to be better than Golden State. Nobody. And so if you are the next best team, it's not where you want to be. You want to be Golden State, but you're not going to be Golden State. And so the fact that these two guys, along with Clint Capella and others, have gotten to this point and they continue to tweak it and try and get there, whatever, that's all well and good. But they have reached the ceiling, and so that's as good as you can ask for. And so in that respect, I think it has worked and is working.
I mean, they won 65 and 55 games back-to-back years.
I mean, what do you want?
But I obviously don't know Daryl Morey and don't know what he's thinking, but here's what I think Daryl Morey is thinking.
Would you ever name your child Daryl?
Never.
Okay.
No chance.
Yeah, okay.
It's not possible to be better than the Warriors.
No!
The only way.
It's not.
But listen, the only way to beat them is to hit 23s a game for 4 straight games. That's it.
They gave it their best shot, right?
And guess what, though? Chris Paul is one of the greatest players in the history of the NBA. He's not the player that's going to help you do that because he's not a three-point shooter. So if you can unload,
he is a three-point shooter.
He's a decent three-point shooter.
He's a good to very good.
But if you're gonna play with a player that has the highest usage rate in the history of basketball, in James Harden, you don't need any other stars. You need 10 dudes who can just stand there and are ready to make a shot.
Fire.
Ready to make a shot.
Stone
when they get the ball, because they ain't getting it for 5 minutes at a time.
The last thing,
imagine if James Harden and Giannis Antetokounmpo switched places. If James Harden had all those big guy shooters on his team, and they could play all those diverse lineups.
Am I envisioning the Houston team of this or the Bucks team of this?
Put James Harden on the Bucks.
Milwaukee? Okay, yes.
Not in the situation, not the town or the coach or anything like that.
Players.
But just give him Mirotic and Ilya Silva and Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton. Those are all better shooters than what the Rockets got. The Rockets have good shooters. Eric Gordon's a good shooter. There's better. Right?
Yep.
And that's the thing. Right now, you're at a crossroads. And so if you can dangle Chris Paul and go get a bunch of players, like the number one spot right now that's being floated for Chris Paul is the Jazz. If you turn Chris Paul into your boy Jingles and a couple other shooters.
Nobody's Jangles, baby.
And a couple other shooters, I think that's a win if you're the Rockets on two fronts. First of all, you don't have Chris Paul's contract anymore. And second of all, you're galvanizing James Harden.
Maybe so. One last point. I know we're supposed to get out, but I just can't help myself. I got to do this with Clint Capella. We talked about yesterday how, regardless of what you and I think, and we disagree a little bit on what Kevin Durant brings to the Rockets, or to the Warriors, excuse me, we both agree that Kevin Durant on any other team would make that team more better than whatever he makes the Warriors. Clint Capella is the opposite of that. Clint Capella's best situation by 1 million miles is in Houston, doing what he's doing there. And if you want to give Daryl Morey credit, he's doing exactly the thing that we talked about with football in the first hour, which is the set of skills that Clint Capella has are 100% accentuated and used to their maximum potential in Houston. They're going to run the floor, shoot the ball within 7 seconds of every shot clock or whatever. A guy who can run the high pick and roll with great athleticism and great feel with James Harden, better than just about anybody else, and he can get up and down the floor. I don't know if I've ever even seen Clint Capella shoot a 10 to 15-foot shot in an actual NBA game ever in my life. I don't even know. I don't know if he could do it.
I don't even know he looks like shooting besides when he's shaking at the free throw line.
Just mortified. So here's what I'm saying. You want to trade Clint Capella? Maybe, okay, but buyer beware, okay, because you've seen him be his absolute best. It seems to me that anywhere he goes, he can't possibly be as good as he is in Houston because he's doing all the things that he does well and none of the things he can't do by virtue of the way they do it. And if you ask him to do anything other than that, I think you're in trouble. Now, if you want him to do those things, then good for you, and he's shown he can do it. But I don't know that you're going to – there's no way you're going to get more out of him than what he has gotten out of in Houston. That's what I think about Clint Capella. So, for the record,
I totally agree. It's going to be fascinating to see how this all comes about because I think that Chris Paul, despite his injury history, despite his recent trend of becoming sort of disgruntled and making himself expendable, I still think Chris Paul does have a couple of good years left in him. And if he was to go play with certain players, I think that he could. I mean, imagine if him and Anthony, everybody was talking about Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, Chris Paul and Anthony Davis together. Well, I mean, let's go. Because Chris Paul that's the thing about Chris Paul is different than most of the other dudes in the league. Kyrie Irving is a pretty good facilitator, but Kyrie Irving's a 25-point per game guy. He always has been, he always will be. If it comes down to it, Chris Paul is totally happy going 16 and 12. He'll throw alley-oops to Anthony Davis all day.
Totally. But here's what makes Anthony Davis great. Anthony Davis and anybody, let's go.
That's exactly it. That's why Anthony Davis is the number one piece in this whole thing. Because Kevin Durant individually is so spectacular, but what does he do for anyone else, and what does anyone do for him? Neither one matters because you just give him the ball and you get out the way. That's very similar to what I'm saying about James Harden. That's why, Anthony Davis, though, what you just said is completely right. Because Anthony Davis can do everything.
Yes.
He is the Clint Capella rim runner who also can step outside and knock down threes, and he can take you off the dribble. It's going to be fascinating. This is such a what if that'll never, ever, ever, ever happen. But how cool would it be if Chris Paul went back to New Orleans, where it all started? And it's Chris Paul, Anthony Davis, and Zion Williamson.
Yeah, well, you're right. That will never happen.
It will never happen. But
it's more likely that Chris Paul goes back than Anthony Davis stays.
Anthony Davis had a meeting with David Griffin today.
Yes,
we'll see. No. We will see. Here's the thing, man. Everybody has made this a foregone conclusion, and Anthony Davis could just crybaby and refuse to play again next year. But guess what? Anthony Davis plays for the New Orleans Pelicans until July 1, 2020, until otherwise noted. And so I just feel like Anthony Davis is going to make a scene, and he's going to try to leverage a trade. But the Pelicans are going to try to make him play with Zion Williamson. They're going to try, at least for a minute. Because why wouldn't they? Like, trading Anthony Davis before any of this stuff starts is just stupid. Make him go to practice with Zion. If he doesn't show up, whatever. Hold on to him for the first 25 games of next year.
Yeah,
because what if he just comes and plays once and he's like, okay. And likely, you're 100% right. It's very unlikely that that'll happen. But what if he was like, oh, okay, let's do this.
And Anthony Davis is good enough that his trade value would likely remain high until the very end. However, the risk that you run is when every other team knows that he's about to be a free agent in 45 minutes, why am I giving up anything to go get him now? It's a very tenuous rope that you got to walk. Hey, it's Tutel Nuanez. It is time for a little Wing It Wednesday, so give us a call. Give them the number. Colter.
329-1899. Ryan's dying. 329-1899. I got 3 questions. They're really hard, but we're going to get you through it.
Are they hard?
They are all about Montana natives getting drafted in the NBA.
Oh.
That actually might make it easy because there's only been a few.
Yeah. Okay. 329-1899. Wings to the Desperado Sports Tavern. They're the ones you want. They're the best wings in Missoula. We'll do some trivia with you right after this. Hey, if you haven't been yet, it's 80 and sunny out. Maybe it's time to go to the golf course, specifically the Canyon River. Canyon River Golf Club is outfitted with brand new golf carts. They have the Shark Experience. What's the Shark Experience? Well, it's a dynamic interaction with the player, giving bunker, hold distances, front and back of the green, water hazards, everything that you need to know, including with touchscreen capability, the ability to set up shots, know distances. Maybe if you're like me, maybe you're not on the fairway every single time. Maybe you're on another fairway, trying to figure out how far it is to get back to your original fairway. Well, guess what? You can know right away. Dynamic, interactive distances as the cart moves. Also, Bluetooth capabilities. You bring your music out there. They've got surround sound in the carts now. How great is that? Now they're jamming to Milli Vanilli and the Yeah, Yeah, Yeahs.
Or you can listen to Tutel Nuanez.
The greatest thing. I mean, the greatest thing you can do. You'd be out there golfing, listening to us right now. Okay? Canyon River Golf Club, online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. You can save a bunch of money by setting up online tee times. Okay? Very, very easy. CanyonRiverGolfClub.com gets great savings regularly online, both in terms of the online booking and also specials that they have on there all the time. And yes, the course, spectacular. Along the Clark Fork River, there in East Missoula, a beautiful setting. Go check it out. Missoula's premier golf experience, Canyon River.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
For 61 years, a handshake has meant something at Rangich Brothers RV, offering the best quality, reliability, and savings in western Montana. And to say thanks, we're celebrating all May long during our May Days anniversary sale. To celebrate, we are offering exclusive deals on Jayco models. Enjoy May Day savings and hit the road in a new Jayco Whitehawk travel trailer, starting at only $279 per month OAC. Plus, enjoy May Day savings like never before on a new Jayco Eagle HT fifth wheel, anniversary priced starting at $29,995. Stop in, save big all May long during our May Days anniversary sale. Only where a handshake means something. Rangich Brothers RV Center.
Hey everybody, Ryan Tutel, and I'm here with Josh of the Advocates Injury Law Firm. Josh, there's a lot of lawyers in this area. What makes you different?
At the Advocates, we primarily focus on injury cases. That gives us the experience and the knowledge to correctly evaluate your case and work with insurance companies and other attorneys so you get exactly what you deserve to make you whole again. We take really good care of our clients, and we're going to fight for every single dollar you deserve.
Call 640-4444 or online at MontanaAdvocates.com. There are a lot of lawyers. You deserve an advocate.
Some so-called sports bars, you spend so much time fighting to see the TV, you're better off just staying home. Others show the game, but a basket of stale rye chips is not exactly your idea of a good game grub. At the Desperado, you get front row seats to every single spring baseball and NASCAR event, plus all the spring NBA and NHL postseason action. And with juicy burgers, ice-cold brews, and the best wings in town, you'll leave the Desperado satisfied whether your team won or lost. The Desperado Sports Tavern, where the emphasis is sports, food, and good times on South Russell, across from the Y.
Still emerging from your winter hibernation and need to get your bearings straight? Cruise on down to Borda, Missoula for all your spring and summer needs. Come check out their men's and women's streetwear, sunglasses, and shoes from brands like Vans, Adidas, Thrasher, Volcom, and the original Borda, Missoula brand. They also have all your skating needs covered, from tune-ups to fresh-made custom boards. Borda, Missoula, Missoula's original board shop since 1989, on the Hip Strip, 618 South Higgins.
Missoula Bone & Joint is now offering the anterior approach for total hip replacement surgery. The anterior approach accesses the hip joint from the front so the surgeon can go between the muscles that surround the hip joint, reducing trauma to the tissues surrounding the hip. With the anterior approach, the patient may experience shorter hospital stays, earlier mobilization, and accelerated recovery with less pain. Call Missoula Bone & Joint at 721-4436 so we can discuss the anterior approach and the best treatment options for your hip pain.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good evening, ESPN Sports Center. Ryan Tutel, Colton Nuanez, along with you. Trace Tinkle, he's a 6'8" swingman. He played high school basketball at Missoula Hellgate. He's at Oregon State, and he announced yesterday he will return for his senior year with the Beavers to play for his father, former Montana head coach Wayne Tinkle. Trace had until today to make a decision about whether to remain in the NBA draft. The senior is a two-time All-Pac-12 selection who is 511 points away from setting Oregon State's career record in scoring.
3 edge players coming to the University of Montana as transfers. Ryder Rice, who's from Savage, Montana. He spent the last couple of years at Rocky Mountain College. He will graduate transfer to the UM football team, as will a couple FBS drop-downs. Joe Babros from NC State by way of Saddleback Community College, and Mason Vineyard from Washington State, also joining Bobby Hauck's Grizz football program.
And finally, 4 Montana natives will compete in the NCAA Outdoor Track and Field Championships in Austin beginning on June 5th. Montana senior and Missoula native Hannah Fauser will become the first Grizz to compete in the national meet since 2015. Big Fork native and Colorado standout distance runner McKenna Morley, Corvallis native and San Francisco 800 specialist Sadie Henderson, as well as Helena pole vaulter Chase Smith of Washington will also compete. Also tonight, Game 2, the NHL Stanley Cup Final, 20 minutes away. The Boston Bruins have a 1-0 series lead over St. Louis. Okay, time to do a little trivia. It is Tutel Nuanez, 109 ESPN Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Chris Polaris studios. Chris Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83. In Sealy, online at chrispolaris.com. 329-1899, the phone number. All guests join us via the Rankich Brothers RV phone line. We go to the phone line, and we welcome in Jay to the show for a little Wing It Wednesday. Jay, how we doing?
Doing pretty good. How about you?
Doing excellent, Jay. Thanks for asking. That's very good of you. Here's the deal, my friend. 3 questions for you. You get 2 of them right, you got yourself a basket of wings to the Desperado Sports Tavern. If you get all 3, we'll give you a shirt as well. If you need help on any one of them, I am your lifeline. Coulter is asking extraordinarily difficult questions today, so we'll see what we can do, try and get through them, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Boy, some chicken wings would really hit the spot.
Tummy likey. Tummy want wingy.
Okay, Jay want wingy. You got questions about Montana NBA players. So here we go, Coulter. Let's have it.
Jay, number 1. Trace Tinkle, who's a Missoula Hellgate graduate, elected to return to Oregon State from his senior year. Who is the last player who played high school basketball in the state of Montana drafted into the NBA?
I'm going to say Larry Kristoviak. No, Josh Eustace. Josh Eustace.
Good audible, Jay. I was going to say that was a good guess at Kristoviak. He was the last Montana Grizzly drafted, and one of only 2 Montana Grizzlies drafted. But Josh Eustace is the correct answer.
Absolutely.
Josh Eustace was actually – I don't know where you stand on this because Josh Eustace was not – where do you stand on what makes somebody a native? Because Josh Eustace was born in Texas, but he grew up in Great – I mean, Josh Eustace is my brother's age. Josh Eustace was playing for the Great Falls Elite from like 6th grade on. I have no idea when they moved to Great Falls, but he was –
Well, particularly for basketball, if you went to high school in the state, if that's what we're talking about, you're from Montana, you're going from Montana.
Right.
So, I mean, native, I don't know, but when we're talking about this, I certainly –
he's from Montana.
Absolutely.
Totally. Okay,
and
Josh
I think,
Eustace.
by the way, for that, it's such underpublicized.
He was a first-round draft pick.
People are not more on this kid is just it's mind-boggling. Goes to Stanford, goes to the NBA.
It's almost crazy how sometimes when athletes leave Montana, how they get a little bit less publicity than the guys that are like stay home or the guys that walk on and rise to great heights. Like my brother always says, like my brother's that senior class. I mean, if not for an ankle injury Matt Miller's getting drafted in the NFL.
Right.
Brock Osweiler was drafted in the NFL. Josh Eustace was a first-round draft pick in the NBA. Those guys were in the same high school class.
Insane.
Like that high school state tournament, I remember watching that thing like that. Those are three incredibly good athletes.
Now, Jay, I'm sorry that we're doing this right over the top of you. Don't worry, we haven't forgotten you. But I got to ask, doesn't it feel like Trace Tinkle gets so much more publicity than any of these guys? And rightfully so. He's a Pac-12 Player of the Year type candidate, and also part of that is because of the Wayne Tinkle, the family thing that's going on there. They're gone.
It's several factors, though. There's only been 33 Lady Grizz to ever score 1,000 points. Lisa McLeod is one of them.
Yeah.
There's only 7 Grizzlies to ever score 1,500 points. Wayne Tinkle's one of them.
Right.
Then Wayne Tinkle becomes the head coach at the University of Montana. Jocelyn Tinkle is arguably the greatest women's basketball player to come out of the state of Montana since Shannon Kate.
Yeah. There is a lineage there. Yes.
You talk about Ellie Tinkle as they're one of the most famous families ever from Montana.
All right, back to Jay.
Jay.
Sorry.
All right, number 2, Jay, who was the last Montanan to play college basketball in Montana to get drafted in the NBA?
That's Larry Christovia.
That's Larry Christovia.
Man.
2 for
now
2.
He had it in there. Wings for Jay. Very well done, Jay. Okay. Question number 3.
All right. This is an all-time hard question. And shout out to Bill Lamberty at Montana State for helping me with the answer, because I didn't know the answer to this. Who was the last Montana State Bobcat from Montana to get drafted in the NBA?
I'm going to have to go with Ryan. I'm a Montana guy, not Montana State.
Yeah. It really wouldn't matter. This has got to be was there about 11 people on Earth the time that this took place? We're going back. This is Old Testament here. I got no idea.
Jack Gillespie from Great Falls. He was drafted in 1964.
That's not as far back as I thought we were going to go, actually. Jack Gillespie, huh? Jay, I got great news. Okay? The shirt, it wouldn't have fit you. Okay? You got the wings. That's what you came for. Very well done going 2 for 2 on the front end of this thing, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yep. Give your information to Tommy first before you go. I'm always worried they're going to hang up, then we won't have them, and we won't be able to have them out. Jack Gillespie, from Montana State, going over there.
Yeah.
Where did he get drafted?
Well, that was the NBA draft used to be a lot different. It used to be a lot more rounds. Also, it was very territorial. It used to work differently. You used to be able to draft players before they actually came out, too. Like the Boston Celtics drafted Larry Bird before his senior year.
Okay, but who drafted him?
Good question. I have to fact check.
We'll tap Bill on that one as well. Okay, very good. Wing It Wednesday in the books. Show in the books after this. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Jack Gillespie was drafted in 1969 by the Los Angeles Lakers.
Now we can sleep easy.
166th pick overall. 12th round. Used to be 12 rounds in the NBA draft.
We ate a lot of steaks before we came up with the Montana Club's Private Reserve Cut Angus. It's as good a steak as you're going to get. Our Private Reserve Cut Angus is specially cut for us. And with our custom seasoning, it has a flavor that's absolutely incomparable. We're confident that it will satisfy the most discriminating steak customer for an unrivaled steak experience. Real Montana, real food. The Montana Club on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Hey folks, the best season of the year is upon us. That's right, it's tax return season, and there's one place to have the most fun and make that refund check stretch further than anywhere else, Selway Armory. Selway Armory has the largest selection of firearms, ammo, and accessories of anywhere around, and they have the expertise to go with it. It's not everywhere that you can shop local and save money, but Selway Armory will meet or beat any box store price, and your money stays in Montana. It's tax return time, so get more bang for your buck at Selway Armory. Visit online at selwayarmory.com. BurkshireHathaway.com.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
When you need a bank to help ramp up your savings strategy, look to your local bank, Opportunity Bank of Montana. Build confidence in your financial future when you create a rainy day cushion or take care of the nest egg you already have. Opportunity Bank offers options from basic savings to money market accounts and certificates with competitive rates. There's nothing like the feeling of progress, so let's get started today. Come see us at Opportunity Bank of Montana. OpportunityBank.com. Member FDIC.
This is Shannon Flanagan with Flanagan Motors Mazda, and this month's Community Corner is Garden City Harvest. Garden City Harvest has been around Missoula for a number of years now, and it's one of our favorite nonprofits. I have Mark Wayne with us here. Mark takes care of the youth program at Garden City Harvest. What kind of volunteer opportunities do you have?
Especially at River Road and Orchard Gardens, you can come out and volunteer for veggies, and you just come out and work with the farmers, and there's an exchange rate between hours and, poundage of food. And it's a great way, if you don't have the time to start your own garden, to come out and kind of get your hands in the dirt and then still see a nice reward from that.
Who do they?
Where the electorate gets a mulligan. So. I wanted to say a comment, and then I got a question. First, I want to salute your courage. And that's...
Maybe so. Wouldn't surprise me if I had. I've messed up very many things in my life. Tommy says, don't push any of the buttons that don't have arrows. There's only 2 buttons that have arrows, and I've been out here pushing bunches of buttons. Just try to have some fun. Just try to have some fun. It's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Hope you're having a great day. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy. Online at KurtzPolaris.com. If you missed anything in the show, we got you covered on the podcast. The podcast available on the TuneIn Radio app and on iTunes. Also available on Spotify. The podcast is available thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. You want to go check out the Tucson and Nuanez podcast? Yeah, you can subscribe, review, rate it, review it, all those things. Did I say review twice? How about a third time? There you go. Thanks very much. We appreciate it. Coulter, yes.
1 second, we gotta tell the people. We'll remind you a couple times throughout the week. Two things. First of all, tomorrow, Thursday, we start our golf giveaway.
Oh, yes.
Stay and play golf giveaway at the Headwaters Golf Course in Sacagawea Inn over there in Three Forks, one of the great places to stay in all of Montana.
Go play a round, stay the night, and then play another round.
Or you can play, you get 2 18-hole rounds. It's a 9-hole course, so you can play 2 9-holes, and then the next day play another one, or you can play all 18 and stay, or you can stay and play all 18, wherever you want.
Yeah.
We got cart, we got range balls, a bucket of balls for you to get warmed up. We got everything. So that's fun, and all you got to do is call in and tell us what your dad means to you, because we're kind of doing this as a lead-up to Father's Day.
Yeah.
And so that'd be good. And also, from our sister, I guess, or maybe we should even call our mother station, The Trail, big announcement Friday. Tune in to Craig Johnson's show right at the end of the show. We got big news coming from The Trail, so tune into that as well.
It'll be about 9:45 a.m., something like that, 9:50. Craig goes from 6 to 10 a.m. So, it'll be.
Also, Craig Johnson on the cover of Montana Lifestyles magazine this week.
Shout out.
If you ever wanted to know what the Golden Voice looks like, there he is in all his glory. Great article, too. Whoever wrote that, good job.
Craig has been a radio icon in this town for 4 decades. And couldn't be happier to get to work with Craig daily.
Surreal.
It's great to have him here.
I used to sit there and organize my baseball cards at my house up Grant Creek and call Z100 to request songs from Craig every single day.
Wow. I won tickets to what was then Big Mountain from Craig and Al. C100 back in the day. So it's great fun to get to work with him. I also have, I'm like, I wonder what he thinks about, me as a radio guy. Does he like it on the radio? And then I realized, well, he's never been awake for 1 second that we've ever been on the air. He's out. He is snoozing her up right now, getting his afternoon nap in. Because he got to get up at 3:30.
What's his great line? What's his great line? My life is an endless string of naps.
Yes. Oh, too good. So, yeah, Friday, tune into to Craig on the Trail in the morning, 103.3 FM in Western Montana. All right. Coulter, we got like 2 minutes left. You got anything special you want to say? Anything you want to tell the people?
Well, we're still encouraging Tommy to bring back Comatose Smile. That is Tommy's award-winning and hit band.
Yes.
I heard them on the trail last night, so that means they're famous.
Yes.
It's getting towards the end of May, so we're furiously wrapping up our wine and wine fridge giveaway on the U 104.5, another one of our sister stations. So tune into Aubrey and Mike for details on that. But basically what we're giving you is a wine fridge from Fred's Appliance, as well as a $100 wine experience from the boys down at Warden's Market. We give away a lot of good stuff around here.
Sure do.
I think the only bad part about working here is you can't win it.
Some numbers for you. The Cubs, -110 favorites over the Houston Astros today. I think it's a road game in Houston. The Cubs still favored in that one.
Only you would give baseball lines in May.
And also, the Boston Bruins.
Hey, tell me about this. This is what I'm interested in.
They are a -165 home favorite tonight. 5.5 goals, the over-under in this thing. They did get 6 goals out of it with the empty netter. How many empty net goals have made or broken the over-under in hockey? Seems like a perilous bet to go on the over-under 5.5. I don't know that I would get out there on that line. A good dear friend of mine is coming to watch this game. He's a big Bruins fan. He's rooting for the Bruins. I feel like I'm happy to have the Bruins win. I don't care about the Boston thing. It's fine with me. But I would like the Blues to win this game, because if the Bruins win this game and they go up 2-0, now you go back to St. Louis, okay, this could be a short series. Could be a short series. That's all I'm saying. Boston looks awful good. Boys and girls, enjoy the NHL tonight. NBA tomorrow. Talk about it then. See ya.